what's the right level of difficulty in your life? Because it's not zero and it's not all the difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember being really fixated on this, perhaps because I was in some ways so privileged, and in other ways I didn't feel like my life was like smooth and easy. And so that question really bugged me.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the first of a series of group dialogues that we're doing. And we have never talked as a group before. And by the way, welcome to Grace and to Ethan. And the purpose of this is to do an experiment with having really open and honest conversation where we talk about topics that can at times be controversial or personal, and attempting to see how far we can go in being truly honest and dealing with different points of view, withstanding kind of fear of conflict that some of us may have, probably all of us have to some degree, and essentially knowing that we've committed to doing at least 6 of these. So no matter how the conversation goes, we know that we'll show up for the next one, and we know that we'll always be civil towards each other in a spirit of total honesty. And one other thing I wanted to say is that even though this is my project that I've put together, I don't want you guys as much as possible to give me any sort of leniency. I want you to be totally honest and just, speak it as if you're talking to people that you really can say whatever you feel like saying to, knowing just at the very base of it, we're human beings talking. So with that said, the subject that we're talking about today is kind of the big subject of privileges, rights, and luck. We all are born with certain privileges, advantages. We believe we're entitled to certain rights, and we are lucky to have some of those things. This is a very popular topic when it goes to the area of privilege by race. As it's called, white privilege, but that is not necessarily what I'm interested in talking about. However, if we do go there, that is great with me. We can go anywhere. But I'd love to start with just a brief introduction of your name. If you could say how old you are, that would be interesting as well. And if you could talk about some of the advantages you feel you have, either you were born with them or you earned them. I would just be intrigued as an entry point to discussion to know those things. So does anyone feel like starting?
I can go first.
Okay,
I'm
thanks.
Grace. I'm 20 years old, and I trying to think of some advantages. I've worked really hard for my education, and so that's one of the advantages that I think I've had. I've worked really hard in subjects that I was previously lacking in to become proficient and good with them. For example, math. I used to really struggle with math, and I put in a lot of work, and now it's one of my advantages. And my education is something that's been an advantage, even though getting an education and obtaining it has been really difficult for me and my family in certain aspects financially. But there's been sacrifices that have been made for me to be able to have that advantage. And so that's one of my strongest suits.
It's a great intro. Thanks, Grace.
Mhm.
Ethan?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm 28. And when I think about advantages that I've had, I think the number one is, in a fairly similar way, education, and particularly, I guess, the way that I was raised from a very young age to value knowing things deeply or learning about things or being curious about them and thinking carefully, and being raised in a house with, I guess, a lot of books. But I think the number one thing that is maybe different and an advantage that I had over even people who lived similar lives was, I think, a specific thing that my dad in particular instilled, which was that there's no magic that happens when you learn something difficult. Like, I grew up with him writing um, like all these Greek letters, doing math on his like pads. We'd go to the beach and he'd be like he'd be like working on his stuff. And it always seemed so unattainable to me when I was like 10. I was like, I'm doing multiplication. Like, how do you possibly get to the point where you're writing these like letters? But he was just very insistent that it really was just one step at a time. And that every step was as doable as the next. It's just that, and his view is probably different than mine, but I think his view would be that most people just give up at a certain point or think, oh, that's not something I'm capable of. And I think that was very important in enabling me to learn and become smarter, was having it kind of drilled in that it's like not about your brain or your genetics, but about your willingness to keep going and to treat each bite of learning as something that you can choose to do. And I think that's like when I got to college, I just noticed how much that was helping me and how much other people had not received that idea. Yeah.
Wow. I feel like that helps me to know you better very quickly. So thank you for that. I'm going to have questions and thoughts on each of the things you guys said, but first I'll do my introduction. So I'm Evan, I'm 40. And I feel like I was born with a number of advantages. I often think about the fact that being tall has been great in my life. Like, people seem to respect people who are tall just automatically. I don't know if it's like a primal kind of thing that, maybe the person is towering or is strong, or I don't know. But and there's various other just like kind of physical things. But I had the advantage of being born, relatively intelligent. But I'd say something that happened to me that I didn't ask for that has been one of my main advantages, and also it has a negative side too, is my ability to think independently and kind of start by doubting the veracity of a statement when I hear it. So I have like a light bulb that goes off when I hear orthodoxy, essentially somebody saying, well, they say. It's like, well, who's they? And what does that mean? Or you're supposed to, or something like that. Then I always begin questioning. Doesn't mean I'm going to disagree with it, but I always say, who benefited from that? How many people actually agree? How many people have ever thought about it? So I've ended up a very independent thinker. And like I say, there's been some issues with that, which is that it can be alienating, but it's been very helpful to me in business because, for instance, I started a marketing company that's been successful, and that's because I was able to reverse engineer Google search algorithm. And I'm not good at math or anything like that. I've just thought in a very simple way about it, and not too many other people did that. I just tested and worked hard, and good things came from it because I didn't listen to what everybody else said. This is how it works, and I just doubted it and moved forward from that. So it's been advantageous in that way, but it's often alienating. So that's something I can get into if it comes up. So yeah, from here, we can just talk about anything we heard that is of interest related to this idea of, I'm curious, the things that you guys were born with. I'm hearing from both of you, you were born with intelligence, and Grace, you were born with a drive to work hard.
Yeah, I don't know if I was necessarily born intelligent.
Oh, okay.
There's definitely things I excelled in as a child, such as reading and vocabulary and things like that. But when it came to math and formatting things and stuff like that, it was really hard for me. And so I had to get out of the mindset of I can't do this and I'm dumb because I don't understand how to do basic math, and really work hard to be at the point where I am today. And it was, my mom and I actually were just talking about this. I mean, I'm about to graduate with a degree in accounting. I'm looking into some computer science. And I never thought that that would be the kind of career path I would go, because I was so insecure about my ability in math and, you know, things with technology and numbers and everything. But it was just me constantly getting frustrated that I couldn't do it. And once I figured out how numbers made sense to me, I was able to open an entire world. But there's definitely some advantages I was born with, and some that I worked very hard to achieve.
You know, I heard something that Ethan said that I felt like wasn't mentioned as much, or it isn't properly acknowledged, which is that you can work hard and take it bite by bite, but you need to have the organic intelligence to even do that. And, you know, I agree, Ethan, with the notion that many people have the ability to do that if they were not intimidated by looking at the end product of that work or intelligence, which is like knowing the Greek symbols or whatever it is. But some people don't have the organic intelligence to get there. It would just constantly be frustrating for them. So I feel like that is worth acknowledging. I mean, do you guys acknowledge that or agree with it?
It's something I don't think about because it's uncomfortable to think about. You know, I'd rather chalk up my ability to, you know, actually, Grace, I studied computer science for 2 years in college before bailing and switching paths. But I actually had, in my own way, a similar experience of like in 10th grade, or like before 10th grade, I was kind of not bad at math, but kind of struggling to be like, it took a lot of effort and I put a lot of deliberate effort into it and became good at it. And I mean, the answer to your question is, Evan, I don't know, and I prefer not to think about it because I don't like to think of myself as different from other people because of what's, you know, in my skull. You know what I mean?
I have a good thought to what you're asking, Evan. To me, everyone has their own strengths, and what maybe your organic intelligence isn't necessarily geared towards math or educational kinds of things, but maybe you're really good at art, and that's where your strong suit is. I don't think everybody has the same intelligence that can be used for the same things. I think everyone can try, but that doesn't, I mean, I definitely think that, you know, you kind of do need certain blocks in order to build up that structure of being able to do a certain skill. And just because you lack the blocks in that certain realm doesn't mean that the person is any less valuable. It just means that maybe their skills are somewhere else.
Yes, I wouldn't make a judgment on someone's value, certainly, but
Yeah.
but I guess when I talk about organic intelligence, I'm probably talking about like the ability to put together theoretical concepts, something similar to IQ, which seems to be like reasonably repeatable. I don't know that it certainly shouldn't be a defining thing for a person, but well, I think it's interesting. I mean, what I'm hearing from Ethan is what I perceive as part of your ideology, or kind of the unconscious, culturally assimilated beliefs that you have, that you shouldn't think too hard about inequalities between people because perhaps it's uncompassionate. I don't want to fill in the blank there incorrectly.
Yeah, I would say it's less of a cultural thing than a personal, like, and it's less unconscious than conscious. It's like, it's because, I don't know, I guess I figure my life is probably better if I treat everybody as, and maybe you disagree, you know, maybe this isn't true, but I kind of figure my life is better if I don't go around thinking of myself in terms of like my like genetic makeup and like, oh, my organic brain, but rather think of myself as just like a psychological like person. Do you know what I'm saying? That's not like hardwired to be smarter or something, and isn't necessarily, but just I just have chosen, I do one thing and other people do other things. You know, I guess I figure my life is better that way, rather than kind of comparing myself.
I
Maybe it's not.
I like what you're saying from like a human standpoint, but I feel like I want to challenge you on that because um, you know, in certain, I mean, how can you properly evaluate people, let's say, in a context where you're an authority over them? Let's say you're in a work context or something. If you're not being fully honest about the full package or the complexity of the human being before you. I mean, certainly in a work context where you need productivity, it feels valuable to say, okay, this person may not have as high of an IQ, but they're phenomenally charismatic and people want to follow them or something like that. So I feel like it's useful for that, but I also am generally a fan of seeking out as much truth about the person that you're talking to and yourself as possible. But I think it becomes problematic if it's accompanied by a feeling that you're better or something because you either have a natural advantage or an earned advantage over others. I think I generally go through life feeling pretty vulnerable and that I'm no better than anyone, and I can, you know, kind of fall flat just as easily as anybody who has, you know, fewer advantages than I do. But it helps me to keep in mind those uncomfortable truths because somehow I can navigate the world a little bit better if I acknowledge them. And that one isn't particularly important to me, but I picked up on it because it seems to have, it seems to be a thread that's connected to a root that's something of something very important about you.
I think that if we as a society often attribute someone's value with their productivity, like value as a person, like if they're worth. So I think in this context, it's really important to separate just because someone doesn't have the same, like the organic brain power that you're looking for, it doesn't mean they're any less of a person. So if we can get in our mind to separate those values that seem to be pushed on us, because at least in America, it's very, what you contribute to society means you're a good and worthy person. That's kind of like the, if you're not working hard, you're not worth as much. That's not what I think at all, but that's something that's very ingrained in our society. So in this instance, if we can separate that from, you don't necessarily have what I'm looking for in a hiring role, for example, and that's fine. You're still a great person, but unfortunately, I'm going to go for the person that has the higher brain power. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. It becomes wrong when you discriminate against people based on like, you're bad, like, you know, I don't really want to be friends with you because you're not that smart. That's, I mean, just being rude to people because they're not. When it's for a purpose, it makes more sense to me.
Right. Well, being rude to someone, I certainly like, that's one of my main principles is to be kind.
Yeah.
And just, you know, kind of keep in check the fact that everybody is vulnerable and everybody has their own problems and stuff. That's really important to me. But I think we're discriminating all the time in our ways. Like maybe, like I probably wouldn't want to be friends with someone whose intelligence was like a certain level. Like if I truly couldn't talk to them, I'm giving an extreme case.
Yeah.
Generally, intelligence is moderately important to me in a friendship, for instance, because I need to be able to have enough conversation. For most friends, I guess some friends I could just hang out with and like we get drunk together and that's our thing. But for a deeper friendship, I think I'd want at least enough ability to have conversation and to look at you know, the world around us. But a lot of that's not in pure intelligence. It's in observational skills, social interests, and communication abilities, and different types of intelligence.
Yeah, and that's not just going off the organic matter. It's going off of them as a person, which I totally can get behind that. It's where people discriminate against, well, they're not that smart, so they're less than. That's when it's wrong to me, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
But I see that, like, for example, now I'm thinking about my friend group, and I'm more drawn to people who can have stimulating conversation, who like to get into, philosophical discussions with me. And there's nothing wrong with people that don't. I'm just more drawn to people who are willing to have that kind of friendship with me. You said something about being tall. I wanted to bring that up.
Okay.
Because I think that has some. So I'm not tall, but I'm pretty short. I'm like 5'3". And
I was thinking we should wait till episode 6 to reveal our height reveal.
oh, sorry. No, I'm a pretty short person. And when you were saying the people respect people that are towering over, I was thinking, there's a lot of times that I've worked jobs where my height and my gender are at a big disadvantage. For example, I worked in kitchens for a long time, and I was very young, and I was a head baker of a gastropub. And, it was a great job, and I worked very hard to get there. And I was totally proficient at my job. Things were going great. But because I was such a small person and a girl and young, the respect was often lacking. And people did not want to look up to me as even though I was above them and technically supervising them, they did not want to give me that respect because of my age, height, and gender. So how do you guys think your height and gender has played into an advantage or disadvantage?
I have a thought, but I've been speaking more lately. Ethan, if you want to respond.
Well, let me hear your thought, then I'll
Sure. I think that, as I said before, my height has been helpful. My gender, in the exact circumstance you're talking about, has been very helpful.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of a package of, I think generally the way I look, as long as I don't act like a total goofball, there'll be a default of general respect, I would say. Whereas I would think that there's a whole mixture of reactions to you because you're female. Being short, I think, has some, I don't think 5'3" is short, but, let's just say that, that's what you're saying. And you're young, that's a huge factor too. I think that a lot of men certainly are gonna be thinking of you as if your being is more diminutive, and you're deserving of less respect than someone that looks like me. And they're probably also to some degree sexualizing you, I would think. That's a very uncomfortable truth, but I do believe it's just absorbed. Many men are like, oh, if it's a woman that they find attractive or something like that, and she's young, there's going to be some sexual element as well that either makes them more nice to you or want to give special favor, but certainly not respect if we're talking about that word. So I think there's a few disadvantages that you come in with, and some would say, there's an advantage that some people would be nicer to somebody with those characteristics, but I don't know if I would take that trade-off.
Yeah. I have thoughts that, but I want to let Ethan go.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything too terribly insightful, but in thinking about this question, I mean, one situation where that comes up that I've been grateful for being, or like recognize the advantage of being a man is as a therapist. We don't really talk about it that much. It kind of gets swept under the rug, but I do wonder for some of my friends and people I know in my program who are women, particularly very young women, and working with men, I mean, I imagine that sense of being or potentially being sexualized is kind of always there in a way that I don't need to deal with as much. And when it does come up, it's much more comfortable for me to deal with, I would think. And that's something, I mean, I really can't, I mean, there's people I've met who are, you know, for example, like a 25-year-old woman working at the VA with veterans who are, you know, probably who are generally 50, 60s older. I mean, I can't imagine that ever being totally absent from the room. I mean, that might be strong, but like pretty much, you know. And that must suck. That must suck every time, and I'm sure you eventually acclimate to it in a way, but like that's not a good thing necessarily. There's a cost to that acclimation that I don't need to do. And with height, you know, it's something I don't think about, and then sometimes I wonder if it's one of those things I just don't think about, but like maybe in my life it's just like globally better because I'm tall. Maybe I haven't, I mean, I've never experienced myself as having an easy time dating, but maybe it would, maybe, maybe it would only be that much harder were I shorter. I mean, presumably it would be, which is kind of a you know, scary thought.
To me, with my height, it's, so I'm not super, super short, but I'm a petite person. Shop in the kids section, like I'm pretty petite, and it saves money. Don't laugh, it saves money. But people, when they feel like they can, especially men, they can push me around a little bit more, and then they'll use their size and their body to kind of be domineering over me, especially in, you know, culinary jobs where it's tight quarters and people want to be scary so they can, you know, move up quicker, things like that. And I have some thoughts about what you guys were saying about being a woman and being sexualized and stuff. It's there. So I'm in a male dominated field, pretty much every job I've ever had. I'm going into accounting. There's 5 women in my accounting class currently, out of 50 people. And it's in the upper levels. And that maybe that's just my school, but from the most part, there's finances, a lot of men are in it. And, you know, being a young woman who I have worked very hard and I've accomplished a lot of things at a really young age. And I wasn't always a cute child. I started growing into my features later on. And I noticed a shift in how people treated me. And at first it was, oh, okay, it's kind of nice. But then you realize, okay, this is this is not this is not because they're wanting to be nice. And then people think that you've gotten places because of how you look or because somebody wants something from you. And whether or not that's true or not, it tends to be used by men who are feeling less successful than you to discredit you. For example, I'm going to be working with a big 4 accounting company, and I was trying to encourage someone that they should apply to the same company because I really enjoyed my experience with them. And they said, well, you only got it because you're a pretty girl, and that's why they wanted you. And I said, no, I got it because I worked very hard to get where I am. And it's comments like that that get added up, as well as, you know, sexual harassment in the workplace in general. And so that adds another layer to a job. It's not only do I have to do my job, but I also have to do my, like, I have to either, you know, not really wear what I want to wear because I want to dress so people don't notice me, but then, you know, you get called names for that. And if you wear what you want to wear, you get called names for being too provocative. And so it's just what it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. And then when I put on my shell of, okay, I'm done with this, I'm done with the comments, then people say that, you know, they call me lots of names because I'm trying to protect myself, and they think, and they don't want to be accused of anything, even though that they are doing when I'm accusing him of.
Kind of curious who these people are, because I guess in the world that I live in, you don't hear comments like that. Like they may be felt on a very quiet level, but people wouldn't say something like, "Oh, you only got that because you're a pretty girl." That's a very jealous, almost young, naive sounding statement.
I think it's because he was like 21 and or 22 or something, and he's younger, and I think he was insecure. He also was trying to impress me in a conversation earlier, and I was not impressed with him. He had no reason to be, no interest. And so I think that me snubbing him in the beginning of the conversation about not being interested in him caused him to lash out. So that's another thing that happens a lot is if you are not interested in a man and they're like all of a sudden, I can be rude to you as I want because you're not interested in me. So I can call you mean names and I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, I've seen guys do that when they're feeling rejected.
Yeah. And it's not okay, but they're lashing out because they feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
Which is like, you really think I'm gonna go out with you after that? Like, nah, fam.
There's a lot of places we can go on this topic, but
yeah,
for some reason, no, that's okay. I feel drawn, just because of my own personal interest, to talk about a disadvantage of being a man, because I feel that that's not talked about very much, and we're in a moment where we highlight the disadvantages of 3 or 4 groups, mostly, cross sections of the population. And this is one that, I'm not in any of those, so I don't get to talk about things that that matter to me as a member of a group as much. But as a man, it really bums me out that I don't have access to basic conversation that most women seem to have, that is more personal in nature. Like, I can't like cry with a guy friend that I haven't known 5 to 10 years, let's say. Even then, it would be very difficult. Perhaps, Ethan, you have a different experience, but the base level, I've known you for 2 hours conversation that a woman can have, I am jealous of, because I would like to be able to be more personal. I suppose I'm more feminine by nature in that way, that I like to have personal conversation. And men tend to, the stereotype I think is true. Men talk about things rather than emotions. So I feel left out of that dialogue. And as a result, I have female friends. A number of my close friends are female. And that's really the attraction, is to be able to have more personal conversation more easily. So I certainly feel at a disadvantage because men haven't learned to do that, or I don't know, maybe by nature it's tougher. I don't know. I tend to think it's a cultural thing.
Ethan, do you have something you want to add? Or
I do have thoughts, but you seem to have something.
I don't want to go run over you, so you want to go.
Sure, and then you can go. It feels like treacherous waters, this topic a bit, because of the reasons that you're saying and where the culture's at. I do think what you're saying is basically like why I'm a therapist, because like I want my life to be more oriented towards experience and emotions and those personal things that you're speaking about, rather than things. And also that I'm in an environment where it's more open. People can speak more openly about what it's like to be a guy and how it's not always a good thing. And what you're saying does resonate with me, when I think about growing up. I can confess I sometimes have the thought that perhaps some people would take issue with, like, like if I'd gotten the shit kicked out of me at school and I was a girl, maybe people would have reacted a bit differently. Or if I'd been crying as much as I was crying when I was 10 years old, I wonder if people might have actually cared a bit more. um,
Hmm.
and that experience more broadly through life, that there's a difference in how we're socialized. And like, obviously these are like gross generalizations, but like you can ballpark say that like women are, I think, more socialized to expect or to rely on help from others, for better and worse. And men are more socialized not to, and to show less and to rely less. And for me as a therapist, I think that's a terrible curse that makes the world worse, to this like idea of like self-reliance and masking what's really going on. And that's something I feel very driven to help other, to like I really, it's funny because I'm in an environment that's dominated by women. My program is maybe 3/4 women, and that's an unusually large number of men. I visited, for example, at Baylor, their program was 23 women and 1 man when I visited. And that's kind of the norm in psychology. Psychiatry is different. Psychiatry has a lot of men, but psychology and social work, et cetera, it's pretty much all women. And so I have this funny experience of last year being assigned to work with a lot of men, because if a man came to our clinic and wanted to work with another man, well, it was kind of me or 2 other people. And it's something I feel very driven is like, and I feel an affinity when working with men who I think receive the same message that you're kind of talking about, Evan, and that I definitely got, which is like, suck it up, or deal with it, or don't tell anyone, or don't cry. And I do think that that is a terrible thing, about being, I mean, now this language is coming from my her, it's like, is it being a man or is it being raised and socialized as a man? You know what I'm saying? To like de-essentialize it a bit, you know? But of course, that's one particular way of thinking of things. Yeah, so Grace, I'm curious where your mind was going.
Well, I think in a previous interview, I had said that I would never be with a guy who doesn't cry. I personally don't. I think it's important that everyone cries. I have a hard time crying, and that's my own issue, and I'm going to therapy for that. But it's important to me that people have emotions, and I think from my experience with, I'm friends with a lot of guys, is it's not that they're not emotional people. It's they have been socialized and not given the tools how to talk about them. And I think that's a real disadvantage to society when we make one group of people carry all the emotional burden, and then of like not showing anything, and then the other one are supposed to be super emotional all the time. And for example, if a woman is too emotional, that's not good. If a man is not emotional enough, that's not good either. He's too cold, and it can be vice versa. And I think we kind of need to stop treating gender as like a basis of how people's emotions should act, and more teach how to regulate emotions in general as a society, and not label it as good or bad or male or female. But for example, for me, I'm someone who often has been told I have like the emotions of a man, because I keep my emotions in. I'm very self-reliant, and I don't like asking for help. And I'm normally the rock for people. And that's how I've adapted to my life and what I've needed to do to survive. And so that's one of my thoughts, where it's like emotion isn't actually the way we think about it, isn't actually the biological gender thing. It's more about how people adapt. And I adapted the opposite spectrum, but there's so many hurting men out there who just don't know how to talk about their emotions. And that's why, men have a higher rate of suicide than women, because they don't get help and they don't talk about it, because when they do, they get shunned. And one thing is, so I talk a lot about, I was in treatment for an eating disorder, and it's been a big part of my life. And I've been asked to do speeches and podcasts about it. And one thing I talk a lot about in it is there's actually a lot of men that have eating disorders, and they don't talk about it because it's a girl disease, it's a girl problem. And that's not the case at all. It's a human problem. And so I think it's important for women to take on some of the responsibility. I see myself as a feminist and an intersectional feminist, which means I need to care about men's issues just as much as women's issues, just as much as, non-binary people's issues. And so I try to talk about emotions with men, and a lot of my guy friends, I will try to take them to the side when they're having a rough time and be that person to talk to them about their emotions because they don't feel comfortable doing that with their friends yet. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, one of the things coming up for me is like, yes, men have a higher rate of suicide, but all the people that have not killed themselves who are male, who are suffering, it's just such an enormous amount. I mean, look, everybody suffers. Life is difficult, but it feels unnecessary, and it's too bad that so many men are raised in a way. I was touched by what Ethan said. When you're 10, like, that there's the possibility that you could have gotten a little bit better attention in, whatever that scenario or scenarios were. And I had similar things, and I didn't feel like there was a lack of sympathy, but, complete lack of sympathy. But I did notice there was a certain point in my life when I got old enough, when I was no longer a kid and could be given the sympathy that someone would give a young boy, young man on the rise, going to make something of his life. Suddenly I was an adult man, and virtually all sympathy was removed. That's what it felt like to me. And sometime in my mid-20s, it's like people now just treat me as a guy. And particularly in today's environment, I do get the messaging from the national conversations that are, giving important, much needed attention to groups that have been treated unfairly. But, I just kind of feel a bit left behind, both as an individual and as a group member of the group, the male group, who, are people with problems trying to get by like anybody else, and want to be listened to and want to be heard and have personal conversation. And it would be nice if at least men did that for each other. I'm sure there are men out there that do that, but it's certainly rare in my experience. I think about it, I look for it a lot, even in groups outside of my own social groups.
I'm just thinking, I went to all boys school growing up. And when I got to college, I think a majority of my friends were then women. But I didn't really have the chance to know any women growing up, basically. In high school, there were people I sort of knew. But yeah, it was, I think that was the loss. Pretty anti-single sex education, which is, certainly the main topic of this conversation.
I feel like if it's an all boys school or all girls school, but I feel like especially with all boys. So I was on an all boys rowing team, except me. I was the only girl as a coxswain. So I was able to witness a lot of like the inside locker room vibes of guys, as high school guys. It is so toxic. And I would be pulling them out like, we don't talk like that to each other. Like, no. And they were shocked that someone would say anything. But that's a different point. But it's really toxic because a lot of the time there's one person that's domineering the vibe for the entire group. And if that person is someone that's like, you got to be super masculine, you got to be super tough, no feelings, if you cry or whatever, it only takes one person, and then everyone falls into line and starts to form around that. And then there's just that toxic camaraderie. And also one thing with that is, you're never going to rat on your homie because he did something wrong. You're part of that group of like toxicity. And like if they they beat up someone in the locker room, they're not going to snitch. But you know, we should be caring about each other, not about like the one dude who's cool. That's just what I noticed witnessing the inside. It's just something
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think we all probably agree that what is termed toxic masculinity sucks, and
it does.
you know, we want as little of that as possible. But just to bring us a little bit more central to the topic, I think what we've talked about is very much on the topic, but just a little bit more, you know, to the general topic. This is something I think about sometimes, which is one of those thoughts that you don't say out loud that much, but I've realized is true, and I'm comfortable with, which is I want as many advantages as I can get in life. So I try to stack up the combination of the natural advantages I was born with, the privileges that I've been given access to, and you know, anything good that I can get. And I don't wish to do so directly in a way that takes away from others. Although you could argue that if you have an advantage, it must mean someone has a disadvantage, but I certainly don't think about it that way. But I think that I'm often reacting to what a tough childhood I had. And so I'm just like, you know, fuck it. I want to make things as good as I can for myself in my adult life, and especially for my son and for my family and the people that I love, including my friends. So you know, I'm, at least to myself privately, I'm very much a fan of not giving up my advantages and almost not celebrating, because I'm not out there, you know, being all excited about it publicly, but I'm happy with whatever advantages I have, and I would like to increase them, and perhaps I can do good with the advantages I have too. That's maybe the more evolved side of me that wants to do that. So it's like part of me is just trying to stay safe and make up for not having enough when I was younger, and the other part of me that's more evolved is saying, okay, now what good can I do with the advantages I have? So curious if you guys would say the same, because it almost feels like something you don't say, is you want as many advantages as you can get.
So I'm someone who also had a rough childhood financially and emotionally, and a lot of reasons, and it was very hard. And so yeah, I definitely do, and I don't like saying that, but I've been born with some advantages, but some things I had to fight really, really hard for, and there's no way I'm giving that up.
Yeah.
And you know, I want to make, to me, you know, I'm young, but I want to make the life that is what 8-year-old Grace needed. The safety she needed, the stability she needed, the things she wanted and couldn't have. That's the kind of life I want to make. And, you know, I'm pretty cutthroat when it comes to getting what I want. And it's something that's made me successful. But it's also something that sometimes I get a little scared about in myself, because I fight so hard and I want so much that sometimes I'm like, whoa, Grace, hold on. Like I'm not, you know, ruining people's lives or anything, but I will definitely fight you to the end if for that promotion or for that spot in that program. Like I will get it. I'm sorry, but I will get it, because I'm going to do whatever it takes. And it scares me sometimes. I'm like, wait, hold on, Grace. Take a step back. Is this healthy? I don't know if it's healthy, but just what I like think in my head.
Yeah, you know, I think I feel different. My experience is quite different. I in a few different thoughts. Part of the most basic of which is like, to answer your original question, I mean, I think like consciously and overtly, I have this kind of philosophy of you should take advantage of your advantages and use them for both your own enjoyment and also to help others. And if you let them go to waste, that's the wrong thing to do. That's the bad thing to do. And when I think of that, I went to a private school in New York City where a really large fraction of people there were the children of bankers, very wealthy. And it's always bummed me out that all of those kids who could do anything in the world, both pleasurable and good for the world, chose to themselves go back into banking. Like, that kills me. That just, like, it's like if you have a trust fund that sets you up for life or whatever, and you go into that, I don't know, that just really bumps me out. And I've always had this philosophy that I was being shaped by that I should both, I guess it comes up most often with respect to career, do something I enjoy and do something that is actually good, given the advantages that I had. But at the same time, I also think I'm not competitive. I don't, like, there's part of me that feels like I should get rid of my advantages or diminish, like turn my attention away from them. Or when I like I can think of specific instances where it's in a sort of self-defeating way. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying this is not something that's helped my life. But I was very good at debating in high school. And I got to college and I tried doing it once. And it went very, very well. And there was actually something about that made me not want to do it again. Because I was like, this is hollow. I was like, I just did this without a lot of effort and like did well. And like, that's not true of most things that I do, But there's something about that actually was aversive to me, if that makes sense. Like, that made it seem less worthwhile. And I think I sometimes can be self-defeating about saying, well, I shouldn't compete for that, or I'm not gonna take full advantage of what I can, because that would be the wrong thing to do, or that seems hollow or not worthwhile or something. That might be kind of abstract, but I think I can be self-defeating about that sort of thing.
I have a question for you, Ethan.
Sure.
Did you have a stable childhood?
That's a complicated question.
Did you grow up with money?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a difference. You feel like so I'm not saying, this is my perception of, so I know a lot of kids who they don't need to worry about money. And I was someone who had to worry about money way too young and worked really young. I feel like people that have grown up in households, whether or not it's emotionally stable, but financially stable, those people don't necessarily have the same cutthroat drive as the people who have worried where their next meal is going to come from or eaten at the food bank, because you haven't seen that reality, And that's just, for example, my ex-boyfriend, his family's wealthy and he's a great guy. His family's a great person. And one thing that never clicked with us is I'm always trying to go, stack up as many advantages so I can be safe, have what I need, and help others. And he's kind of coasting. And I never understood that until I realized, oh, it's because you've never needed to hustle. You've never had that, oh my God, how am I going to pay for that? Like, how are my basic needs going to be met?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think that's a factor that plays into it.
No, I think it's it. I really agree. As I've met, the more people I meet from really different backgrounds than mine, the more I think that's true. And I notice something that has its advantages and disadvantages that is distinctly different in them than it is in me. And it's different, even though I was raised to be frugal. I was raised to worry about whether spending money is appropriate. I wasn't raised to be casual with money or to like live in luxury, but those things were, and I thought those things were important. But as I've met more people, I've realized that those things are less important, and the fact that we weren't actually worried about actual bad things happening because of money, that there is a very distinct difference that it seems will persist pretty much, for the long haul. And I think you're right. Yeah. Evan, you
Yeah.
seem to have a reaction.
Oh, well, first I was trying to I like Grace's point. I'm trying to think because I had a different response that was in a different direction, but now I'm off thinking about that. Grace and I have a lot in common in that respect. However, so I grew up without much money, but we were lower middle class. Me and my two brothers lived on my mom's teaching salary. So, whatever that is, it's not poverty, but it's not much. But I was given influence from my dad's side. I didn't see my dad very much, and he fetishized money in a way that was very culturally sanctioned. Where I grew up, it was just like people that had money were like exciting and interesting and better in some way. It's like clearly everybody wanted that. So I just got that idea and sought money. And had so much anger about things that had nothing to do with money. And I thought that money would solve my problems. I thought that I could be free and be loved and be seen and all the things that I wanted if I had enough money to have the luxury of like basically buying people's affection. That was what was in my brain unconsciously. And so I was quite cutthroat earlier in my career where I didn't care about anything, but like that was my freedom and I deserved it and stuff like that. So for whatever the reason is, if you're seeking money and there's a desperation behind it, or making up for something that wasn't gotten, where somehow money is the magical answer, which having like a currency that can buy many different things it's easy to make that a magical answer. That's powerful. When I hear Grace talk, and the other time we talked, I had this feeling too. I was like, this is someone that's clearly going to be financially successful. There's no doubt in my mind because of this. However, that to me like doesn't make me say, well, cool, she is going to be more successful. I almost in a way think of what Ethan is doing as just like a really nice evolved way to be. Like, I wonder, Grace, if you have kids, would you want your kids to strive for wealth the way you are?
So first off, I don't want kids, but
If you
um
did.
my thing is, I know it's not a healthy thing, and I've tried to work on my. So one of the reasons I want to be successful is a lot of just a chip on my shoulder and a lot of proving to people that I'm not going to be what everyone expects me to be, and I'm going to do something more than the cards I was given, and kind of just like an FU to people who, have played a bad role in my life. Like, see, you did all these bad things to me and I turned out a lot better than you. And I know I'm going to be, there's no doubt in my mind I will be financially successful, but to me, that doesn't mean I'm going to be happy. And that's something I really worry about for myself, because I can totally envision myself being incredibly financially successful and not being happy. And to me, as someone who struggles a lot with mental health, that's something I've been trying to work on. I've been trying to slow down, and even it hasn't been working, so gotta work more on that. But I need to start realizing, like, I want to be successful enough that I don't have to worry about where I'm going to live or what I'm going to eat, but I don't need to be feeling like I need money is the only way I'm going to become successful, because I can be successful in a lot of other ways, emotionally, connecting wise, like relationships, all those things, those are contribute to success. And if I had kids, I would want them to like look for the things in life that make them happy and not necessarily financially. But I would want to have provided my children a life that they didn't have to stress out about money the same way I did. So they wouldn't necessarily have that same value, because if I did my job right, they wouldn't have the same worries I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I have a dog.
I like that. Yeah, I would say it's kind of like my goal to, well, it is a goal that my son doesn't have to toil and have the same type of, he would never have the same type of relationship with money than I did, because he won't fetishize it, you know, as an answer to something, you know, that's in fantasy. But I'd like for him to have to strive for resources that are not financial. You know, his health, his relationships, his, you know, social currency, whatever gives him meaning and makes him happy. I'd say in that order. So I'd say that I want my son to have to deal with some of the challenges that, at least I imagine on this very little information I have just in this conversation, that Ethan is dealing with. I like what it sounds like you're doing, Ethan, in that you're struggling for something. You're doing it, I mean, in part through your profession that you're going into, and you know, it's up to you to make meaning from that. So you have that challenge. I have no idea what your financial situation is. I assume your parents still have money, but and I don't know how much of that you have access to, if any. But I assume that you're just not as worried about it because you didn't grow up like struggling. And I think that gives rise to something that the world needs more than people that are striving the way everybody had to 100 years ago, 50 years ago.
But I just want to point out, though, the incredible privilege in getting to live like that. And, you know, the fact that, like, I love the fact that people are going to be striving more towards emotional currency and things like that. That's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to point out the fact that that's a very big privilege.
So maybe that's the answer to the original question of what's my biggest advantage in life. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
It's uncomfortable, but I hear what you're saying. And Evan, as you were speaking, I was wondering, because, you know, you came up with the topic, and I wondered to what extent this abstract topic becomes very real for you and is maybe coming from this role that you're in as a parent now, because it's something like that must make these questions have much more physical reality for you, because I feel like part of the thing we're talking about that's been like a thread is like, it's something I remember. I don't really think about that much, but when I was like a teenager, thought about all the times, like, what's the right level of difficulty in your life? Because it's not zero, and it's not all the difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I remember being really fixated on this, perhaps because I was in some ways so privileged, and in other ways I didn't feel like my life was like smooth and easy. And so that question really bugged me. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, I guess I'm just curious if that question feels a lot more real now that I mean, because as parents, I think, you know, part of what you do is you decide in some ways the limitations for your child. You know,
Mm-hmm.
are you gonna give them, are you gonna, you know, pay for them to join a team or get lessons in something, or will they do it on their own? Will they go to this school or that school? You live here or there? Do you let them watch TV? And I could imagine all those questions just suddenly becoming a lot more real and less theoretical when you're in that role.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ethan. It is real. It is a big part of my motivation as I move from the part of my life where I'm like, okay, am I okay? Am I safe? You I kind of always have that, like, young kid mentality, growing up in a tougher neighborhood, like, is anyone gonna, like, attack me or something like that? I gotta, like, fend for myself. So as I move from that to, well, I'm an adult and I have to take adult responsibilities, and I have to be a good member of my community, and principally a good member of my family. And so how do I bring someone into the world in a way that is as good as possible for them? I mean, I want that. And so I have a bit of an unorthodox view. You won't be surprised to learn about what to give my son. Like, I'm much more on the side of giving him a lot. I think that if you give a lot of time and love and understanding, conversation, really listen and take in his thoughts and respond and look at him and stuff like that, I think that if I do that, and he has, like, let's say, a lot of toys, and knows from a young age that all of his schooling will be paid for and a down payment on his house will be made, I don't see a problem with that, because life is going to be difficult for him anyway. Like, even though I acknowledge what Grace says, that you have a lot of privilege, the caricature that because again, I'm just basing on what I know of Ethan, you have difficulty too. I know that because you're human, and that's plenty to think about, and that's plenty of a puzzle to solve. And I love the notion, I'm still figuring this out, but I love the notion that he has to struggle with meaning more than money. And let that be his struggle, is how he deals with, the people around him and the issues that are important to him and what positive difference he makes. I'd rather him just have room to focus on that. Now, if I completely eliminate money, that's not a good idea. If I basically am like, oh, you'll be fine for the rest of your life, I think that's not a good idea, because it removes any ability for him to be self-reliant. And what happens if he blows the money? Or, I feel like it's not a good idea to take away all ability to fend for yourself. But I'm not going to make him work unnecessarily, or pretend that he doesn't have a privileged kind of situation. I want him to take that situation and struggle on higher level problems. So that's currently one way that I want to kind of solve the thing that I didn't get to do enough. I'm trying to do it now, but. Curious if anyone has a reaction to that. Again, this is an environment where you could be
No, I
like,
just think that's a really interesting way of, like, that kind of concept of, they're struggling for meaning instead of financial security. I was just kind of thinking, I wonder what my life would look like if my struggle wasn't for safety and financial security, and instead it was for meaning. Like, and I definitely think that I would have chosen a different career path. I mean, I know what I would have chosen. I would have become a lawyer and been on that path. That's what I would have wanted to do. And so I just think that's interesting. And I think it's also good, though, that you're not trying to say that he's not privileged. Like, you're acknowledging it. You're acknowledging that that is a privilege that he has, but he also is going to have struggles. And Ethan, for you, I didn't mean that your life is perfect. I just meant that it's a privilege that you even get to consider that lifestyle as an option, So I didn't mean that, oh, your life is perfect. And so, yeah, that's a really interesting thought of raising a child.
Yeah.
How old is your son right now?
He's 3.
I can share, I do think I have a partially skeptical or sort of aversive reaction to what you said. And I think part of that is because I'm thinking of people who are not your son, who are the people that I grew up around, who were so spoiled, and that, like, I totally define myself against them. and kind of like my whole, like it really shaped who I am.
Mhm.
Like, like, and I think part of the value, like my valuing impracticality and kind of like the path I'm doing is not a particularly practical one, you know, of doing a PsyD program that like it's, you know, and for better or worse, wasn't in response shaped as a reaction against those kids. And so I have a sort of aversion to that. And also this like question of whether children are capable of wrestling with the questions that you're hoping for your child to wrestle with, or whether that's something you can only wrestle with when you're older. And perhaps there's something that perhaps artificial limitations can do something for a younger child. And I say this, you know, I don't know shit about parenting. You know, I don't, I'm so far apart from that life. I don't know any, it's not like from a psychological perspective, I've been educated in any particular way about children. So I'm just saying in my sort of gut reaction, that like image came to me of like, I totally agree with in principle what you're saying, but does that apply when someone is quite young and really just learning how, like, for example, we think about like frustration tolerance,
Mhm.
you know, is like how do you build frustration tolerance if there's no limitations? And I'm not saying you're saying there's no limitations. Life provides its own limitations.
Mhm.
But something that came to mind is, well, maybe there is a need to impose some artificial ones as well in order for kids to learn how to deal with things. I mean, to sum it up, to do things they don't want to do, because life is full of things that you don't want to do. And I feel like I grew up around so many people who had none of that. And I feel like I have like a medium amount of it.
Mhm.
And I still see people that I meet in adult life who have so much more of it than I do, for better or worse.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic because I'm still figuring it out, but from what I can tell, like with my son, I feel like he has just plenty of limitations, but I don't impose artificial ones. Because I'm not counting as artificial keeping to his schedule. He has to take a bath before bedtime every night. He has to brush his teeth. We brush his teeth twice a day. He doesn't like those things. He also would prefer to eat ice cream all the time. And you know, he's not allowed to run in the street, and he's not allowed to be mean to people. He can talk about having negative feelings, but he's not allowed to hit someone or call them a nasty name. You know, I mean, he can, but then he's going to have the negative reaction from us. So I just feel like he has plenty of limitations without me saying, you know what, I'm gonna make him work for every single cent until he's 40 or something like that. And there's quite a few people that believe that that is the right way. I truly am in the minority in saying like, no, I want him to not have a lot of friction points around, you know, money. I want to have some friction because he has to be able to make his own money or understand that it's very valuable to have, and it allows for subsistence and comfort and a number of things. But yeah, if he's so inclined, I want him to struggle with meaning. But the way you grew up and the people you're talking about, I actually think about that a lot too. And this is my current theory I'm operating on, and I could be wrong, is that a lot of the stereotypical spoiled rich kids got money in place of other things, and that's the big problem. Not completely in place, but at least partially in place. So if you don't spend a lot of time with your kid and you give them money, that's a recipe for them to be depressed and messed up because they need your time, and there's just something missing that's being filled by something not as valuable. Even if you spend a lot of time with them, if you're not really connecting with them and listening to their feelings and emotions and thoughts, which I think is like that next level, I think a lot of people don't realize is happening. That's also not good, and could create you know, a feeling of emptiness or a problem, or a need to try to be better, act like you're better than others because you have money or something. But I guess my theory is that if you are truly very emotionally there for them, allow them to deal with the difficulties of life and don't rush in and save them from it, that would be a major error. If they are having an interpersonal conflict and I'm like, I'll take you out of school, don't worry about it, like that would be terrible. But that is a good, that's my experiment. I think that is good. I hypothesize it's good. I don't know yet.
From the rich kids I've met and who've, you know, have had everything paid for, I definitely see their parents supplementing things with money and gifts, or, you know, experiences like going to rich camps and things like that. And so I'm really interested to see how your kid's going to turn out, if he's actually being, because you seem like someone who's very emotionally intelligent, and it's going to be very interesting to see how your kid turns out with a very emotionally intelligent parent who's intentionally parenting them. And I'm wondering if maybe your kid might be super, like, have his rebellion phase of being anti-emotionally intelligent as a teenager, or, you know, it's going to be really interesting.
He probably will. I would
Yeah,
have to
probably.
think, because I care so
Super
much about it.
cool.
Somehow I bet he will.
Would be,
Yeah,
but yeah, I definitely, it's an interesting thought.
it is. I don't know if Ethan, anything came to mind from that, since your question brought up all that
Yeah.
content. Yeah.
No, it's all very interesting, and it's, you know, it's interesting how, yeah, the conversations between the three of us are at one in one sense philosophical, but like also totally rooted in our actual experiences of the world, you know what I mean, and not abstract at all. And again, to go abstract again, but like I think there is this question that's like core to this whole topic, which is like, I feel that I think was like undergirding what I was saying, which is like, I feel like everything that I am, and I don't know if this is a healthy thought or an unhelpful thought, but I feel like everything I am is because of the struggles I've had, not like that, like that is who I am, or at least everything valuable or sort of like tough. And it's very, that's such a complicated thing, because most of the time we want fewer struggles. And yet I don't know who I would be. I certainly wouldn't be me if not for them.
I definitely resonate with that, because, you know, I had a very complicated and at times very difficult life in a lot of ways. And people often ask, do you wish things were different? Do you wish things weren't as, you know, abusive or, you know, unstable? And the answer is no. I mean, that would be nice, but I honestly do not think I would be at the place in my life where I am or work as hard if I hadn't had those issues. So I wouldn't trade it. I mean, it would be nice, but I wouldn't be me today.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction is, I think it's just a good question. I have no doubt that our struggles are what made us all who we are, principally, in addition to, you know, some things that happen in early childhood and just the places we found ourselves and what other people do in those places, culture thing. But yes, those are major things. However, almost nobody has tried. Almost no one has been successful at, you know, raising a child that essentially like doesn't need therapy. I have met almost none in my entire life. So it would be interesting to see, because I have no doubt that, you know, that idealized human being, that child who grows up in a stable, healthy household and is properly acknowledged and has reasonable challenges and all that stuff, might also say they're defined by their struggles, because they're going to have struggles. But it wouldn't be like what we're talking about. You know, we were all shaped by bigger struggles to differing degrees that really set us on a certain course. But who knows? Maybe we're meant to evolve away from that. Maybe that's life that is more suited to people, living in the day and age that we're in, and people in 500 years will, not be worrying about money as much or security as much, and God willing, if, we don't blow ourselves up or something, but like, and can deal with these issues of meaning more, and issues of what's right for all of us as humans collectively. I guess that's my hope. But yeah, I don't know what the answer would be for somebody like that, and that's why I'm curious about my own experiment. I'm sure I'll make plenty of mistakes along the way and screw up, but yeah, this is something I'm curious about. I don't know that it's been tried very much. That's my point, I guess.
That obviously that is the goal, that people can live more in meaning and create joy and everything and not have struggles. But one thing that I have a thought of is everyone can take a certain amount of pain at different levels. So for me, what might be considered easy could completely destroy someone else, or vice versa. And so everyone's tolerance and levels are different. So they experience, things on different levels. And so what generally might be simple for some people emotionally creates problems, and that's their adversity. And so I think everyone will still have problems and be shaped by their problems, whether how trivial or meaningful they are, just because that's how people adapt, and everyone has different levels of pain.
It's true, yeah.
And I really hope that people's pain tolerance gets a lot lower. I mean, that'd be great that if people could just, because think about how much energy could be promoted to good if people weren't so focused on healing themselves and the trauma inflicted on them during their life. And instead they could promote that energy to other things. Sounds great to me.
Yeah, and that feels like the idea to me. I think that's what I'm operating on, as I see a little bit more of that generally over my lifetime. It seems like things have pointed in that direction of a little bit more focus on mental health, and each generation doing a little bit better. At least that's been people that I have known collectively.
I feel like as Gen Zs, which is what I am, I feel like we're more open to talking about our feelings than people before us. And it's especially going back to men, I feel like it's not there yet, but I definitely know a lot more guys in my generation group than older people that feel more comfortable talking about their emotions or crying and are more in touch with their femininity. Like a lot of straight men are painting their nails now, and that's just what makes them happy. And that's accepted, at least in my generation. They're like, oh, nice nail color, dude. And I know if, for example, a boomer would see that and be, flabbergasted that somebody painted their nails. Right. And so I'm hoping that as we go on, we can create more emotional intelligence and less psychological issues.
I think it's all down to talking, just like you said. People can talk, then people can be understood, and people can find truth in themselves, and figure out what's right for them. It feels very good to know the truth about yourself, which is why one reason that therapy is so valuable.
Thanks, Ethan, for going into therapy.
Yeah, thanks.
I've been through 12 therapists, so like I got a roster. So I was like, when people go into therapy, I'm like, oh yeah, good job.
It's funny because from the outside, it's so, it seems like you're helping so many people, and in some sense you are, but it's slow. It's a very slow, unreliable way to help people. It's not.
You got to click with the person.
It takes a lot of time, and it's really not guaranteed. And most days you don't come away feeling like, oh, I really changed someone's life. It's, yeah, but I appreciate it.
Guys, I think this is a good time to end this dialogue. So I really appreciate the spirit of openness and vulnerability you guys came in here with. So